Hi, my name is Michaela Durst, and the theory I will be discussing today is the social judgment theory. This theory was created by Muzaffar Sharif, who is a social psychologist at the University of Oklahoma. He called this theory the social judgment involvement approach, which is basically when we judge or interpret a message or idea. He refers to it as an analysis of attitudes, and he calls our attitudes latitudes. He states, and I quote, "An individual's stand is not represented adequately as point along a continuum. Different persons espousing the same position may differ considerably in their tolerance around this point." So he created three zones of what our attitudes are. The first zone or latitude is latitude of acceptance, which is when any idea or statement we have or we have heard becomes acceptable. The second latitude is rejection, which is when we find statements objectionable. And the third latitude is non-commitment, which is not thoroughly discussed in our book, but it is when we are undecided and have no opinion on the matter. Sharif discusses ego involvement and how it relates to this theory, and that is when we decide how important an issue is in our own lives, and there are two stages to this theory. The first stage is judging, which is when we evaluate the content of the message. The second stage is the shifting of our attitudes, which is the lesson we take away from the message and how our attitudes adjust, whether it's for the better or for the worse. He talks about how we can use our own attitudes, which are anchored as a comparison point when we hear a message that could be discrepant. He believes that there is a parallel between systematic bias and how we determine other people's attitudes. This theory gives us an idea of a link between ego involvement and perception. Sharif uses the terms contrast and assimilation. Contrast is when a message falls into the latitude of rejection, and assimilation is when a message falls in the latitude of acceptance. According to this theory, when we have judged a message after we have heard it, and it has fallen into the latitude of acceptance, we adjust to it, and it's kind of an A plus B equals C. And when this happens, the persuasive effect is positive, but it is partial. There is something also called the boomerang effect, which is when our attitude change goes in the opposite direction of what the message is trying to say. This can actually cause listeners to stop listening. They don't want to hear any more of it. So an example I have of social judgment theory is a scene in the movie The Blind Side. The scene is when Michael is discussing how his new home and his guardians are to his social caseworker, and she is trying to convince him that they only took him in because they want him to attend Ole Miss University, nowhere else, to get into the football team. Nothing else matters but that. And he says, "No, that's not true. They really care about me. I mean, why else would they take a boy off the street and take him in as their own?" And she said, "It's just to get bonus points from the university. They're boosters." And he said, "Well, I really don't believe that's true." And he gets really nervous and upset, and he ends up running away kind of after that conversation with her because he's angry, and he has kind of fallen into that latitude of acceptance. She has persuaded him enough at the very end of that conversation on her side, and so now he's angry at the Tuies who have taken him in so kindly. So the first critique that I have for this theory is when do messages fall in the latitude of non-commitment, and what is the criteria for that? It's not really discussed, like I mentioned. Sharif never really talks about it, and it would be just kind of interesting to see. I wish we could see like what his point of view was on that latitude of non-commitment. The second critique I have is that we should always be careful when we are trying to persuade others. We shouldn't be too pushy because the result could be the boomerang effect, which is the exact opposite of what we want to happen. The message we try to convey becomes mute. The third critique that I have is that we as active listeners should always be respectful of everybody's opinions. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with them. If you disagree with them, it is okay to voice your opinions, but you should not be rude to people or disrespectful to people. It's a golden rule. If you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it at all. And saying, talking about why you disagree with them and what opinions you have is is totally okay. But when people become rude and disrespectful, that is totally not okay. You should never cross that line. The boomerang effect happens because people are going to stop listening to you when you become nasty and mean, and they're going to go the way they want to go. And sometimes people, when they get nasty and mean, other people are going to join in with them just to get them to stop being that way. And then again, you have the boomerang effect. So that is all I have for this theory competency video. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your semester.